Imagine a moment. You aren't posing. You aren't smiling on purpose. And you aren't trying to be better than you are. You just are. And in that ordinary moment, someone looks at you. They don't just look, they see you. For a fraction of a second, time stops moving. The noise around you becomes background. Nothing is said, but everything has already been spoken, because eyes cannot lie as masterfully as words do. A man's gaze, when he is truly moved, isn't a gesture, a signal, or a game. It is a leak of truth. The subconscious breaks through where the conscious mind still tries to maintain control. It is in the eyes that a certain light appears, a light that cannot be switched on by command, a rhythm that cannot be faked, a pause that gives everything away. Have you ever caught his gaze and felt that he saw you before he even had time to realize it himself? It happens in milliseconds. He walks into a room, and his eyes find you first. They don't scan the space, they don't glide over faces. They seek you out purposefully, instinctively, like a compass that always knows where north is. He might turn away immediately, greet someone else, or pretend to be busy, but that first, almost imperceptible search has already happened, and it speaks louder than any words. You are the point of reference. This isn't politeness, it isn't a coincidence. The subconscious confessed before the mind had time to put on a mask. If you have ever noticed this moment and felt something stir inside, know that you have begun to see what most people never notice. Write one word in the comments. I see. Just, I see, so that your intuition hears it. I no longer miss the truth in the eyes, because this first search is only the beginning. Then the gaze begins to tell a story that he himself isn't ready to accept. It lingers, it returns, it draws invisible lines across your face. It glows with the light that only ignites when something real is inside. When you learn to read this language, everything external becomes unimportant. But more on that later. For now, just close your eyes for a second. Remember the last time his gaze found you first. Feel it again, without analysis, without doubt. This isn't a fantasy, it's the beginning of truth. It is the first search, only the door. Behind it begins the real story, a story that the eyes tell without words. The next sign. He doesn't just find you, he lingers. Not rudely, not boldly, but for exactly that fraction of a second longer than ordinary politeness requires. Social rules say, look, then look away. But when something real is inside, the rules break. The gaze lingers, then pulls away as if he's scared you noticed. A moment later, it returns again. Briefly, shyly, as if checking, is she still here? Did she see? This is not a random rhythm. It is an internal struggle, visible only in the movement of the eyes. One part of him wants to hide the feeling, look away, put on the usual mask. The other part hopes you will see them, and so the gaze returns like a magnet. If you catch this small, intermittent dance, looking away, returning, looking away, returning, know that this is not a game. It is a conflict between what he allows himself to show and what he can no longer hide. There is another layer. How exactly his gaze moves across your face. This isn't a direct, fixed, I am listening to you look. It is a soft, almost unconscious journey, from one eye to the other, then down to the lips, then back up. Sometimes it skips across the cheek, along the jawline, or the space between the brows. This isn't an inspection. It is drawing, an invisible tracing of the contours of your face, as if he is remembering you anew in every moment. One who looks without feeling looks straight and steady. One who has been touched by something deep leaves these thin, elusive trails. To see this clearly, do a simple thing. Say something important to you, even something small. Pause and just observe where his gaze goes in that second of silence. If it naturally, without any encouragement from your side, glances toward your lips, his body has already said what words aren't yet ready to pronounce. Eyes do not lie. They can try to hide, they can look away, they can pretend to be distracted, but in those tiny moments when control weakens, the truth breaks through. If right now you are remembering such a look and something inside you tightens or warms, write one word in the comments. Lingering. Just lingering, so that your intuition hears. I see. I no longer ignore what his eyes are saying, because lingering is not a coincidence. It is a confession, quiet, involuntary, but very honest. And then the gaze begins to glow, not brightly, not theatrically, but with that very inner light that ignites only when a person sees something more in you than just the face across from them. More on that later. For now, just stay with this feeling. Remember the last time his gaze lingered, returned, and lingered again. This isn't a fantasy. It is a language that speaks louder than any words. Lingering is already a confession, but the gaze doesn't stop there. It begins to glow. Not brightly, not theatrically, not with the kind of light you can switch on with a smile or an effort of will, but with a quiet, inner light. The kind that ignites only when a person sees something more in you than just a person across from them. This isn't aggression or hunger. It is a soft, almost reverent warmth. His eyes become slightly brighter, slightly warmer, as if a small fire has been lit inside that he isn't yet ready to name. When he looks at you with this light, he isn't evaluating, measuring, or possessing. He is simply fully present, without masks, without defense. In these moments, blinking slows down. The pupils dilate slightly, not from the light, but from what is happening inside. The face softens, the forehead relaxes, the jaw releases tension. The gaze becomes steady, open, receptive, as if saying without words, I am here, I see you, and I don't need anything else but this moment. This isn't weakness. It is internal stability. The ability to hold a strong emotion without letting it destroy you. The ability to just be, without haste, without demand, without fear. If you talk about something personal, a fear, a dream, a small victory, or a pain you rarely show anyone, pay attention. His gaze doesn't wander. It doesn't drift. It doesn't become distracted. It stays, listens, and accepts, as if creating an invisible space around you, safe, patient, entirely yours. This cannot be acted or faked because such a look isn't born in the head. It is born in the place where a person is no longer afraid to be seen themselves. And now, the most subtle and honest moment. When you leave, you say goodbye, you turn, you take a step. And in that final moment, when bodies are already distancing, his gaze lingers. It doesn't tear away, as if asking without words, are you really leaving? You can feel it even with your back turned. A light tension in the air, a quiet, almost inaudible sigh, and if you turn around for even a fraction of a second, you will see his eyes are still there, on you, with that same soft warmth, that same quiet longing. This is not a goodbye. This is an admission. You are the place I want to return to. If right now you are remembering such a look and something inside you tightens or releases, as if it has finally found its place, write one word in the comments. Light. Just light. So that your soul hears. I see this light. I no longer close my eyes to it, because this light is no accident. It is the language in which that which isn't yet ready to come out in words speaks. And then the gaze begins to look for you even in your absence, in reflections, in crowds, in the silence. More on that later. For now, just stay with this feeling. Remember the last time his gaze lingered as you were leaving. Feel that warmth again. This is not an illusion. It is the truth that has already spoken its name. This light is no accident. It isn't switched on by words, a smile, or an attempt to be liked. It ignites only when something real is happening inside. When you become for him not just the person across from him, but the point around which his inner world begins to align. And here is the next layer that is impossible to fake. The gaze begins to seek you out even when you aren't around. In a crowd, in the reflection of glass, in a random window, in the silence of a room where he is alone. His eyes scan the space unconsciously, unintentionally, instinctively, as if looking for a point of support, an anchor they lost for a moment. It happens lightning fast, in a fraction of a second. He might turn away immediately, pretend to be looking at something else, but that short, almost panicked search has already happened. This isn't curiosity, it is a quiet anxiety. Where is she? Is everything okay? When love is real, it carries a light, barely noticeable panic of loss. Not dramatic, not loud, but specifically this quiet, internal one, because that which has meaning, one doesn't want to let out of sight for even a second. To see this clearly, just step away a few paces, say nothing, and don't turn around immediately. Just observe from the corner of your eye. If his gaze begins to move faster, if the pupils dilate slightly, if he freezes for a moment, he is looking for you unconsciously, honestly. Another moment that gives everything away without words. When you tell something personal, you speak of a fear, a dream, a small pain or a small victory, and you pause. In that moment, his gaze doesn't leave. It doesn't become distracted. It doesn't hide behind a smile or a joke. It remains open and attentive. Blinking slows, eyes dilate slightly, as if he wants to take in every one of your words entirely. This isn't just listening. It is presence. Full, unconditional presence. As if he is saying without words, I am here, I see you, I will not leave. This is impossible to play or simulate, because such a look is born only when a person is no longer afraid to be vulnerable with you. If right now you are remembering such a moment, when his gaze became your space, when he was just with you without any conditions, write one word in the comments. Presence. Just presence, so that your soul hears. I see this presence. I no longer accept less, because presence is not attention. It is not interest. It is when a person allows themselves to be completely here for you, and then the gaze begins to protect. Not with words, not with gestures, just with the eyes. More on that later. For now, just stay with this feeling. Remember the last time his gaze just stayed with you without words, without demands. Just was. This isn't a fantasy. It is a language that speaks louder than any confession. This gaze that just stays with you, which doesn't leave when you speak of something real. It no longer just looks. It protects. Not loudly, not demonstratively, not with words or gestures. Just with the eyes. This happens in those moments when someone crosses your boundary, when someone speaks too harshly, too familiarly, or too disrespectfully, or even when you just feel a slight discomfort and he notices it. In that moment, his gaze changes. It doesn't become aggressive. It doesn't turn into a threat. It becomes firm, steady, like an invisible line he draws around you without a single movement. The eyes narrow slightly, not from anger but from focus. The gaze fixes not on the offender, but on you, as if he is saying without words, you are safe, I am here. This space is closed to intrusion. This is not the protection of an owner. It is the protection of something dear, a quiet, almost invisible responsibility. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't interfere. He doesn't make a scene. But one look from him is enough for the air to change, for the other person to feel the boundary and back off. If you have ever noticed this, how his eyes suddenly become a shield when you are uncomfortable, know that this is not an accident. It is an instinct. It is that part of him that has already decided, you are what needs to be guarded. Another moment that is impossible to hide. When you leave. Not just goodbye, but when you actually leave the room, the conversation, the space. Bodies distance, the gap grows. And in that last moment, when most people have already switched to something else, his gaze remains. It doesn't tear away. As if asking, are you really leaving? You can feel it even with your back turned. A light tension, a quiet, almost inaudible sigh. If you turn around for even a moment, you will see his eyes still there, on you, with the same warmth, the same quiet longing. This is not a goodbye. It is an admission. You are the place I want to return to. And now, the deepest and most honest sign. When he looks at you in a moment when you demand nothing, you are sleeping in the car, laughing at something silly, absorbed in a book, or just standing by the window, lost in thought. Nothing is needed from you. No conversation, no exchange, no expectations. And still, his gaze softens in a special, unique way, as if he is looking at something sacred, something that requires nothing in return. That is why it is so precious. It is intimacy without effort, without demands, without conditions. Just presence for the sake of presence itself. If you have ever caught such a look when he thought you weren't looking, and something inside was born, as if it finally found its place, write one word in the comments. Protection. Just protection, so that your soul hears, I see this protection. I no longer accept less. Because protection with the eyes is not control. It is love that has already decided. You are what is worth cherishing. And then the gaze begins to seek you even in sleep, in reflections, in the silence, in every small moment. More on that later. For now, just stay with this feeling. Remember the last time his gaze became your shield or just stayed when you asked for nothing. This isn't a fantasy. It is a language that speaks louder than any confession. When the gaze protects, when it stays with you without any conditions, when it seeks you even in your absence, you no longer just notice, you know. You know that this is not a game, not a fantasy, not something that can be explained by coincidence, politeness, or habit. It is a language that speaks louder than any words, a language that doesn't know how to lie, a language that breaks through even when the mind tries to hold it back. And in this language, there is one simple but irreversible truth. You have become the point of reference for him. Not a goal, not a trophy, not something to be conquered, but the place the gaze returns to on its own, because there is home. You no longer have to ask, does he love me or not? The answer has already been given. In every first search, in every lingering, in every quiet light, in every protective shield, in every parting look that doesn't want to let go. Now only one thing remains, to decide what you will do with this truth. Because seeing it is not the end. It is the beginning of a choice. To accept this gaze as a gift and respond with the same presence, the same silence, and the same honesty. Or to let go if you realize that this light belongs not only to you, but also to him, and he needs time to dare to step forward. In any case, you are no longer in the dark. You are no longer guessing. You are no longer explaining someone else's silence to yourself. You simply know, and this knowledge is your freedom. If right now this warmth is spreading inside you without weight, without questions, just clarity and lightness, know that this is not an illusion. It is your soul saying, you saw, you understood, you are free. Stay with this a little longer. Don't rush to leave. Let this warmth stay with you. And if these words reached your very heart, if you feel that you finally saw what was always there, write one simple word in the comments. I know. Just I know. Not for me, not for him. For yourself. For the part of you that always knew you were worthy of being seen truly. This will be your quiet contract with yourself. I see. I know. I choose myself. Thank you for being here. In this silence that turned out to be louder than any words, in this moment that became your real beginning, if this video found you exactly when it was needed, share it with that friend who is currently looking for answers in the eyes of others. Like this, so the algorithm shows it to those who are also tired of words and want to hear the silence. And subscribe to Quiet Wisdom so you don't miss the next conversations about what the heart truly says, without noise, without masks, without lies. Until we meet where the gaze no longer hides but simply loves.